A good fight-centric series doesn't just have characters who are good at combat, but it finds a way to intricately write cohesive and compelling characterization through those little quirks in combat. For a series primarily about fighting and beating up enemies and even your allies, it's time to finally ask an important question. What are the stick figures' fighting styles? What are they good at? What tools do they use? Do they win or do they get mauled? And most importantly, what cool tricks do they have up their sleeves? And today, we're starting off this series with the stick that surprisingly has the highest number of fight scenes out of everyone, despite being known as the group alleged pacifist. Believe me, I checked. Blue, the master alchemist, the star sharpshooter, and the guy who embodies the phrase, in a group of powerful people, be wary of the one that has a friendly face or a peaceful attitude. There's a reason they're in that group to begin with. So welcome to How Strong Are Alan Becker's Stick Figures, where I break down a character's fighting style, skills, tactics, and combat movesets, and analyze how these things improve their personal characterizations. Disclaimer: this isn't your average power scaling style of video where I talk about strength and isolation for the sake of proving superiority. Also, it's not completely power that I'm after either. It's that relationship between their fighting styles and general personality that I find much more interesting. So take this more of an analysis of their general skills with occasional contrast to other characters, but by no means do I ever want to insinuate that they're less of a character than everyone else. This is especially the case with the Color Gang, where the question of who's stronger isn't the point, it's how strong are they together. So let's begin. Blue from Alan Becker's Stick Figure series is characterized as being the team's emotional restraint, known for his pacifying nature and his immensely protective and caring tendencies towards the group. He's the team chef, someone that runs after his friends' side when they need comforting, and the one that tries to de-escalate situations when he sees tensions rising between them. He's also seen visibly distraught, stressed, or panicked when his other friends are hurt. He's also the team member that tends to have a calming effect on the others, mitigating their more rambunctious side by telling everyone to calm down, with the exception of Red. But that isn't to say that he isn't as prone to roughhousing as the others. He's also got his cheeky side, especially when rightfully enabled by the others' equally childish antics. He tends to go with the flow with their plans without really questioning safety, especially when it comes to Yellow, and especially when it comes to his netherworts. But the question is, how strong is he? Let's start with combat physicality, Blue's actual fighting style.
Nice weather we're having. Die! Die! I never told you that I'm a cold-blooded murderer! You underestimated me!
Blue has different fighting styles depending on the weapon that he's using, but they both follow the same combat philosophy: brutal frontal suffocation. Blue's goal is to encroach on your space as much as he can and make it impossible for you to dodge either his swings or his shot. Blue prefers getting as close to his enemies or kites around them with a weapon to use mobility against them. In terms of raw strength and dexterity, Blue's biggest skill is being a master acrobat both in long and short distances. One key detail that I've noticed about Blue is that he rarely actually gets hit if his intention is to dodge, and most of the time, he's only ever hit because he's distracted or unaware, which is when he has to be bailed out by another teammate, usually green like in The Witch and Bed Wars. That isn't to say that he's impervious though, as he has gotten grabbed before multiple times, especially when the enemy is much physically stronger or faster. Blue's biggest mistake during combat is either overestimating his agility or underestimating the enemy's ability to use his own engage against him. In Titan Ravager, this is the case when he tries to rod it away with Yellow. The Ravager, being much bigger, is able to counter-leverage Blue and Yellow grabbing onto it and sends them flying. In AVA 5, the Virus, Blue is grabbed by the leg when he tries to kick down the spider, misjudging just how vulnerable he was in this position because he's used to also beating it down with his friends. In Potions, he tries to crowd into the pig and incapacitate it by latching onto it, completely missing the fact that the pig is nigh invincible with how much potions it drank. making him the most ragdolled of the bunch. I also find it kind of funny that Blue's pretty quick on his assertiveness here, rather than trying to cool down the situation. It goes to show that when it's not towards people that he finds as allies, his patience isn't as long. Just like how he instantly follows Red's lead on hostility when fighting against the chef in AVA 32, despite the chef being someone that just didn't want to be robbed by complete strangers. Blue's fight choreography is different from Green's, who's also the other dexterity-based fighter of the group. Green's style is fast-paced and overwhelming swordplay that overpowers his enemies with tempered rhythm. On the other hand, Blue weaponizes distance and is the most versatile range-wise amongst the sticks. He's very intentional with how he maneuvers himself around, to, and from his enemies, depending on the weapon that he's using. Blue's attacks are linear, which leaves less room for interweaving compared to Green's, but they're meant to hit much harder and discombobulate his enemies. So, let's break down Blue's two fighting styles. First is his close-ranged capabilities. Much like the rest of the gang, Blue is highly proficient in hand-to-hand combat considering his status as a brawl stick figure. When we first see him, he's fighting against Green. Even in future episodes of Animation vs Minecraft and Animator vs Animation, Blue never exclusively changes from one style to another. Instead, he masters both of them and lets them complement each other. Blue isn't afraid of throwing his entire body at an enemy, especially if he thinks it'll be beneficial. Even when his odds are against him, he tends to move closer unless he has another option. Blue isn't the type to hide from enemies either, and when he finds even the slightest of counterattacks, he seizes the opportunity to the best of his ability. In the Nether episode, even though they were surrounded by enemies on both fronts, Blue takes the leap of faith to use the gas to their advantage. Blue's also not opposed to being the vanguard during combat, as we see him leap from the ghast to parry the fireball. This part of him is also what made him dangerous in the Bed Wars. The moment he realized that he could break the rules of Minecraft, he goes full offensive assault. He climbs onto this one guy's head and starts stabbing him in the face, he jumps back and forth between enemies, and constantly does wider cleaves to damage as much incoming attackers as possible. His goal is very obvious in this scene: uninhibited murder! In the Piglin War, he's a very efficient en masse fighter, being able to parry and block against multiple Piglin without any problem while still making it a point to not actually hit them with the sword. In AVA 12, we see this the best when he's fighting Hazard. Instead of hiding and distancing himself with how Green and Red did it against their opponents, Blue goes for the opposite and runs at them to hard engage. He doesn't have any ranged weapons on him, so he finds no need to kite around Hazard. Ironically, Blue actually has the most options to hide or block from his enemy with the sheer amount of environmental structures around him, unlike Green and Red that had to fight in hallways. And even when he has the options to evade, Blue is still trying to block against the incoming projectiles, and his goal is very cutthroat: get to the main body and initiate contact as soon as possible. When Hazard meets him in the middle and engages, Blue does his best in a 2v1 until he's overwhelmed. Blue's also not opposed to taking unconventionally painful methods in killing his opponent, either by dropping an entire tank onto Hazard or by barbarically taking a clone to bash Hazard's head in. Despite his kind-hearted nature, he is the kind of person that would crush someone under a tube if he must. In the Chef, Blue is the most aggressive fighter alongside Yellow. He has the speed and reaction time to parry the Chef's knives, and he's the one that tries to flank the Chef to give space for Yellow to counterattack. Except he gets distracted by the book and is hit in the head Tangled style. Blue is also very efficient in grappling and displacing his allies. In the same vein that Blue prioritizes his own distance management, he leverages everyone else's and gives them opportune spaces during attack combos. In Bed Wars, there's a scene where he throws Yellow at their opponent and another one where he swings Red, Yellow, and Green over with him. In Cave Spider, he throws Red to the other side of the map to assist Green, and in Lucky Block Staff, he uses the piston block to execute chain aerial attacks with Orange, and helps him get to the blazes since Orange isn't able to fly on his own. Blue also helps Green latch onto the Ender Dragon in episode 10 by throwing him onto it. In the Ultimate Minecart, he tosses Green to the other side of the board with the help of the Speed Potion, and he climbs over Orange. Conversely, Blue also catches people when they're interrupted mid-combat or falling off of things. In AVM 37, we see this a lot with how he catches all of them once Purple's Elytra breaks, and they have to swing to the other side, or when Green and Purple are flying after Purple's Phantom was killed. In the Nether, he's quick to catch Green, who is falling off of the ghast with a fishing rod. Blue doesn't use the fishing rod often, besides to get to one place or another, in contrast to someone like Yellow, who uses it to dodge. Blue's second fighting style is him being an expert marksman, and I think because it happens so much in the background, Blue's talent is heavily underappreciated, being the only one of the sticks to have their entire kit switching significantly. Blue's expertise in ranged combat comes from the original Animation vs. Minecraft, and has expanded to future episodes, including but not limited to dual pistols, a bow and arrow, hand crossbows, and an arrow turret. Blue also gets an upgrade courtesy of Yellow, where he starts shooting with fireworks. He's also been seen utilizing TNT against both enemies and allies as a form of AoE range, such as in Lucky Block's staff against the corrupted staff to defend red, green, and orange, and an ultimate minecart against those same people. He also uses TNT to bomb Green's winnings. Blue's range fighting style, though, doesn't stay ranged for long. Instead, it pitter-patters depending on his assessment of the situation. I'll show you two different scenes. In Cave Spider, he assesses that there's way too many enemies that could overwhelm them, and going into close range has way too much risk. In the beginning of the fight, we see how precise his shots are, able to rapid fire not only falling enemies, but also chaining his shots to either shove them into the other sticks, or shoving them away from everyone else. When he's fighting like this, he tries to find the best angles by either climbing on top of his allies or dodging out of the way of obstacles, and he interweaves his shot in between backflips and jumps. He's also great at finding the most opportune angles for his shots, such as him skewering 3 spiders at once with 1 arrow. Blue's shooting speed on the bow is what makes him a formidable duelist because his shots are almost instantaneous and his reload speed, even on a Minecraft bow, rarely has any lag time. Whenever he jumps from one card to another or he moves backwards, he always shoots mid-action. Even when he drops down to the same level as the others, he's not stopping from providing cover fire for the rest of them. There's hardly any lag between his motions, and it goes to show that when the stakes are at their highest, Blue doesn't stop even if he could. In the raid, we also see him do a sick multi-shot against the archer, before he gets grabbed by a bear trap. On the other hand, Blue isn't afraid of getting up close and personal despite using a ranged weapon. He's held others at gunpoint multiple times, and his style is running at an enemy to make sure that they're too suffocated and too close to dodge his arrows. This is similar in the original Animation vs. Minecraft, where despite having a ranged weapon, he runs at the obsidian red to shoot him down before regretting his decision. This was also how he was fighting the king. He rarely used the bow's maximum range and instead did his best to chase down King Orange. His style during fights like this is constant barrage, with opposed to careful precision, complemented by the skeleton who was running with him providing additional fire, Purple who also held the king down during the initial group fight, and Orange who held the king down during the 2v1. We also see this style in Animator vs. Animation 9, where he runs and guns Alan's cursor only to pay the price of his misposition very dearly. Then, let's move on to his unique combat arsenal. Each of the sticks have a unique part of their kit that differentiates them from each other, and Blue's is the existence of his potions. During the entirety of the series, Blue has created multiple potions, including but not limited to immense speed, transmutation, invisibility, and musicality. During his fight against the witch, we see his speed complement his potion making really well by not only being able to craft so many in a short amount of time, but also being quick enough to change his form to best counteract the witches. We also know that he is able to enhance these potions' potency and break time-space continuum. Much like Yellow's command blocks, though, Blue uses these potions sparingly unless the plot absolutely demands it. Despite being a part of his signature kit, the narrative kind of balances him out by not making him reliant on the potions for extra strength. Instead, we do see him cultivate that talent slowly and develop over the episodes, but he never trades it away for classic training. Well, now that we have what does he do in combat, what about what he thinks in combat? Combat mentality refers to the character's mental state and attitudes throughout different phases of the fight. This goes back to what I said that a good combat usually portrays the character first, then the fight second. Initiative judges how they, as a character, start fights, or if they even want to start fights in the first place. Engagement is their attitudes while fighting, and they're already in the meat of things. And escalation is how they end fights. Do they try to talk the other person down, or do they end fights with their fists? Combat mentality is important in understanding the other subtexts of a character's fighting style because this is where their actual personality resides in, as well as other cool instincts like adrenaline, morality, and mental fortitude. And with Blue, this is important because his archetype is supposed to be the very emotional pacifist. So, his combat initiative, in that regard, is the lowest amongst the color gang. Blue, by all means, would rather arrive to a peaceful ending if he could help it, and he won't fight or aggravate someone that doesn't look like a threat. Even towards strangers, Blue doesn't see potential threats, but instead possible allies. Even if he does feel wary around them, or he's put in a position that he feels threatened, Blue assesses the situation based on risk aversion and reason. In episode 10 of Animator vs. Animation, Blue believed that by surrendering to Agent, he and his allies would be spared of any unnecessary conflict. We see him still stay down despite Red and Green getting beaten, possibly thinking that by showing that he and Yellow aren't threats and aren't hostile, this will all just be forgiven as a big misunderstanding. It's only when Yellow, who wasn't as combative, gets restrained that Blue realizes the gravity of the situation. And that's where the line of pacifism ends. A lot of Blue's fight scenes are derived from self-defense or ally-inflicted. A lot being ally-inflicted, honestly. Which lets us move on to how does Blue think when already in a fight. Blue's engagement mentality, just like the other sticks, is relatively straightforward. End the combat as fast as possible with as little damage to himself and his allies. Blue's engagement mentality, however, isn't consistent throughout his fights. How he feels about a combat highly depends on 3 factors. Number 1 is the hostility of the people he's fighting, number 2 is the danger he's in, and number 3 is if he's alone in a fight. When he's fighting with friends for fun, Blue takes on a balanced approach, especially when in environments with lower stakes or with a higher safety net. For example, in the Ultimate Minecart, he's not afraid to go all out in the name of victory because he knows it's all in good fun. But in PvP, when the stakes get a little higher and more personal, Blue tries to calm Green down before everything falls apart and Blue has to fight against the pissed off Yellow. Blue does, however, still engage in this tomfoolery, but you can see that he and Red just opt to beat Orange on the head with the invisibility potion. Blue knows the restraints of the game and is more than happy to join in on reckless and mildly painful sparring with his friends. He is actually also less adept at fighting his fellow sticks, even though we know that he is able to execute pretty brutal maneuvers. It's possible that he has his own mental restraints against his own allies, much like how the rest of them have for each other. It's a level of respect that they're just there for fun. We see him go toe-to-toe against Red the most for practice sparring, and we see him go even against Red in Bed Wars when it comes to sword fighting, and only gets knocked out when he loses focus off the bed and is shoved off the platform by Yellow. This, however, is different when he has to fight alongside his comrades against a common enemy. Blue is less restrained and fights with more vigor, but he still keeps a relatively leveled head during combat because he has the other sticks to rely on. Blue, when fighting with his allies, is more strategic and focuses on possible combinations he can do with them rather than going in alone like Red or Green. He also prioritizes sticking together with others to make sure that they fight as a group, in the which Blue is seen being extremely attentive of his fellow allies as being the only one that can transform them back. He's able to both defensively counter the witch's transmutation potions with his own and has incredible situational awareness to see who's currently changed and who's not. This reaction time makes it so that each stick's transformation back and forth is effortlessly seamless and doesn't break their team's combat momentum. This is why Blue is a very strong ally, not just because of his actual prowess, but because he thrives in a team environment. This is in contrast with someone like Red, who has at some points been too distracted with vitality to coordinate or have straight up friendly fired. And here's the last part of Blue's engagement mentality. It's when he's isolated and the stakes are at their highest. And that's the clearest aspect of Blue that I think is heavily underrated. The more stressed or placed in danger or isolated Blue is, the more rabid his attack patterns become. Conversely though, we see him lose control of his emotions if it's too much for him, causing him to shut down. Much like his calming effect on his allies have a calming effect on him. He's easily startled by others and doesn't take kindly when he's purposefully put in danger. However, his proclivity to being moved by stronger emotions like rage and fear make him quick to assume the worst of a situation, or worse, lash out. On the funnier side, He's killed Green before out of sheer panic. He's also chased after Red when the latter gets gunned down by snowballs by Orange and Green, only to get massacred himself. But on a more serious side, we see him shaking against the Dark Lord after seeing Red die, and when he loses himself after Green gets stabbed. During Animation versus Addiction, where his relapses kick in, he's very physical with Orange. So, now let's see him in action. I'll be breaking down 2 of my personal favorite scenes for Blue that definitely showcased his potential. The first one is where we see him have to fight alone against the Piglin in episode 20. Blue realizes that he lost the crown while he was asleep and unfortunately has to fend off against the raging Piglin. Realizing that the Piglin have drawn their sword, he tries to evade the incoming Piglin but to no avail as he's surrounded, forcing him to draw his sword to parry an incoming attack. He swings his weapon up to knock the Piglin back on the left, then crouches down to dodge an incoming arrow from the Piglin with a crossbow before swinging back up to counter another strike. He sees 2 of them targeting a weapon down and slamming it through his head, which forces him to do a kneeling high ground, which presses down the Piglin's weight on top of him. He struggles for a bit before releasing all that pressure back onto the Piglin with a cleaving strike. Mid-position, he blocks an incoming arrow with the flat front of the blade before moving sideways to do another hanging guard to use the weight of the Piglin's strike to redirect that same strike's power and throw the Piglins at each other. Blue parries another arrow by swinging upward, then completing that entire motion with a downward strike into another Piglin. Then the Hoglin shakes him off of its back and he goes tumbling to the other side, where he starts making a run for it. It's very important to note that Blue has no intention of actually hurting or killing the Piglin in this scene. We see this difference in intention immediately when he goes for the kill on the zombie Piglin. Blue's strikes are much harsher, where he jumps backwards and stabs the sword right into the zombie Piglin's stomach before raising his sword to tilt his body into a front kick to the zombie Piglin in front of him to knock it on its back. He then turns to slice the zombie Piglin behind him clean through its back before lunging straight into another one by jamming his sword into its torso, pulling it back just to ram it into another zombie Hoglin. Then he slashes through its head again for a clean kill before retreating the sword into a circular swipe right through the zombie Piglin's neck. Whenever Blue goes for the kill, he moves to break his enemy's balance and stabs into them while they're still disoriented. This makes sure that they don't have enough speed to block. Much like his previous attempts at murder, he goes for very vital organs such as the neck, face, and stomach. He physically stops himself from stabbing into another Piglin, having enough awareness to turn and elbow the Piglin away from him instead, then use that shove to throw himself at the zombie Piglin and slice upward through its torso. Blue assumes the ox position with the sword through the outside, but instead of stabbing it into the Piglin's face, he lowers his body to clash the sword into the Piglin's blade to break its balance. He propels himself back with that momentum to crash into the zombie Piglin and purposefully goes for its neck to kill it before lowering his stance from the other Piglin to throw it forward into the zombie Piglin. Blue, however, loses this fight by getting distracted with the child he wants to protect, which I think is a very Blue way of losing. So, here's another one where he constantly goes for the kill without any mercy. In Animation vs. Minecraft episode 36, we see him at his most feral, and where I think his strength best shines because he's uninhibitedly deadly. Blue throws a sword at Luncer's head and realizes that he doesn't actually have to play by the rules of Minecraft. With that, he gains unfound confidence to commit homicide. He starts by doing what works, throwing the sword at Luncer's face before getting beaten up twice. When he's knocked back, he hops onto the wall and uses his right leg to dive forward and roll underneath Luncer to grab the iron sword back. Mid-roll, he propels himself up to jump into the air and starts throwing the sword back at Luncer, but he's stopped by Tins mid-somersault. So he turns and hurls the sword back at Tins before getting bodied by Starlock, which interrupts his trajectory. Blue doesn't yield though and throws the sword back at Tins. He's accosted in the air by a group attack which sends him back and forth like a volleyball before he swaps to a fire charge and bombs the people under him, sending him to the other side and separating the players. Blue grabs onto the sword that's stuck to the ground without any hesitation and jumps straight into Spray's face to stab them right in the eyes. Blue latches onto him before propelling himself straight into Tins to throw the sword right to their front. Blue rolls on the ground and catches the sword mid-air to throw it again at Tins from the front. Then another underhand throw that pushes Tins back, which lets Blue jump onto their face to kick them backwards. Blue also equips another sword. This is enough to shove Tins out of bounds, making Blue secure the first kill. Before Blue could get his bearings and recover from that jump properly, Spray sends a flurry of snowballs and silverfishes his way, which forces him to retreat. He slices down the silverfish without any problems and throws the iron sword straight into Spray, while running forwards to catch the falling stone sword. He dodges Sarlacc's hits by rolling downwards and stabbing the stone sword into the grass. He uses this as an axis to revolve around and build up the upward momentum to fly into Sarlacc and use them as a platform to stab straight into Spray, which he shoves back by barbarously stabbing into the chest. This doesn't kill Spray, but it does give Blue another platform to dodge an incoming fire charge from Lancer, which he uses to do a downward spinning strike. This lands him straight on Lancer's back, which he uses to stab multiple times into Lancer's face before kicking himself off of them and diving for the other sword. He runs straight into Sarlacc while deflecting the arrows without any problems before slashing through them with his left hand. He backflips off of them and does an impressive sword throw while still in the air, which sends the sword through Spray's incoming silverfish and into Spray. Spray tries to distract Blue with the silverfish, but Blue instantly swats it away while pursuing Spray. Blue reaches Spray, but he chucks the sword again into the newly teleported Sarlacc. Blue finishes off this combat by slicing through Spray, then kicking Spray into Sarlacc, sending Sarlacc over the edge before throwing his sword one final time at Spray to secure the kill. So anyway, considering that he's a stick that everyone's always nice to, there's a reason. Anyway, I'm Mushi, and this has been How Strong is Blue? I'm planning to do a series for all of the other characters, so stay tuned for that. Oh, and by the way, before I end this video, if you're interested in watching me play some video games or just casually hanging out with me outside of stuff that is animation shows, check me out here in Mushi Likes Gaming. I will also be streaming on Twitch, but that depends, so stay tuned. Conversely, Blue also catches people when they're interrupted mid-combat or falling off of things. In AVM 37, we see this a lot with how he catches all of them once Purple's elytras. Oh my god, I need water.